Stand on a beach in southern Spain on a clear morning, look south across the water, and you can see it. Africa. Not a smudge on the horizon, not a rumor, an entire continent, close enough to make out the shape of the mountains. The gap between Europe and Africa at its narrowest point is just 14 kilometers. That's it. You could swim it, people have. And yet in the year 2026, there is still no bridge. Think about that for a second. We have bridged wider gaps. We have bridged deeper water. We have built a bridge across the sea to an island 55 kilometers away in China. We have tunneled under the English Channel and run trains through it for 30 years. So why is this particular 14 kilometers of water, the most famous strait on Earth, sitting between two continents, two economies, and 500 million people, still uncrossed by anything but a boat? The answer is not money, and it is not that nobody has tried. The answer is hiding beneath that beautiful blue water, and it is one of the most brutal engineering problems on the planet. Tonight, we'll show you exactly what's down there. The 6 reasons a bridge here has been called impossible. The monster on the seabed that has killed every plan for 50 years. And the breakthrough that just happened. The report that, for the first time in history, said this crossing can actually be built. Stay right here, because the story of the 14 kilometers nobody can cross is stranger than you think. Let's start with the geography, because it explains everything. The Strait of Gibraltar is the only natural gateway between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. Spain to the north, Morocco to the south, and squeezed between them, this narrow neck of water, around 14 kilometers at its tightest. On a clear day, people in Tarifa can watch the lights come on in Morocco. Ferries cross constantly, carrying millions a year. And yet, the two landmasses have never been joined. So let's go through the reasons, one by one, because each alone would be a serious problem. Together, they are a nightmare. Reason 1. The depth. And this is the big one. When you look at a bridge, what you're really looking at are the towers. And those towers have to stand on something, planted on the seabed, or the whole thing falls into the sea. So how deep is the Strait of Gibraltar? At the narrowest point, the shortest crossing, the one that looks so tempting on a map, the water plunges to around 900 meters. To put that in perspective, the deepest bridge foundations ever built sit at somewhere around 100 meters of water, and engineers consider that extraordinary. We'd need towers roughly 9 times deeper than anything humanity has ever managed. That isn't a hard engineering problem. With today's technology, that's a fantasy. And here's the cruel twist. There are shallower routes, but they're longer, and they still bottom out around 300 meters, triple the world record. There is no version of this crossing where the water is friendly. Reason 2. The currents. This is where the strait goes from difficult to genuinely hostile. And the reason is beautiful physics. The Mediterranean is a hot, evaporating sea. It loses more water to the sky than its rivers put back. So the Atlantic constantly pours in at the surface to top it up. Meanwhile, that evaporation makes Mediterranean water saltier, and therefore heavier. So it sinks and pours back out into the Atlantic underneath, along the bottom. What you get is a 2-story river in the sea, a surface current racing east, and beneath it, an invisible deep current racing west, in the opposite direction, at the same time, every single day. Now imagine building a bridge tower in that. Any structure you sink here has to survive relentless opposing forces, shoving it 2 ways at once, forever. Add tidal surges and internal waves rolling through the deep, and you have a construction site that never holds still. Reason 3. The ships. The strait isn't just scenery. It is one of the busiest maritime corridors on the planet. More than 100,000 vessels pass through this narrow channel every year. Container ships, oil tankers, cargo giants, navies. Everything moving between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean funnels through this one gap. Now drop a set of bridge piers into that. Suddenly, the busiest sea highway in the region has concrete pillars standing in it. To let those ships through, you'd need spans of extraordinary width, far beyond anything ever built. And even then, you've created a permanent collision risk in a channel where a single loaded tanker striking a pier could be a catastrophe of historic proportions. Reason 4. The wind. The strait acts like a wind tunnel. Air funnels between two mountainous coastlines and accelerates. Anyone who's been to Tarifa knows this. It's one of the great windsurfing capitals of the world precisely because the wind here is savage and relentless. And wind is the mortal enemy of long-span suspension bridges. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge famously tore itself apart in the wind in 1940 while cameras rolled. Engineers have learned a great deal since then, but the longer and higher your bridge, the more the wind wants to twist it. A bridge here would have to be enormous and high above the water for those ships, in a channel that behaves like a permanent wind machine. Reason 5. The earthquakes. The Strait of Gibraltar sits almost exactly on the boundary where the African tectonic plate grinds against the Eurasian plate. This is a seismically live zone, part of the same fracture system that, in 1755, unleashed one of the deadliest earthquakes in European history, devastating Lisbon and sending a tsunami racing across the Atlantic coast. So whatever you build here, you are building on a fault. You are asking a structure to hold up 2 continents worth of traffic in 900 meters of water, in a savage current, in a wind tunnel, in a shipping superhighway, on ground that can move. And reason 6, the one engineers can't solve with mathematics: politics. This isn't just a bridge between 2 countries, it's a doorway between 2 continents. Spain still holds 2 small territories on the North African coast, Ceuta and Melilla, which Morocco claims as its own, a dispute that has simmered for decades. Then there's migration. Spain has recorded record numbers of irregular crossings in recent years, and a permanent link raises enormous questions about security and control. Any structure spanning this water isn't just concrete and steel. It's a statement about borders, sovereignty, and who gets to move. And that has made every government cautious, no matter what the engineers say. So put it together: 900 meters of water, opposing deep currents, 100,000 ships, a wind tunnel, an active fault line, and a political minefield. And now you understand why, despite 2 continents staring at each other across 14 kilometers of blue water, there is still no bridge. It's not that nobody wants one, it's that the sea, quite simply, refuses. But here's where the story turns. Because if you can't go over the water, you go under it. And that idea is not new. Spain first floated a modern tunnel concept in the 1930s and abandoned it when engineers found the rock beneath the strait was far too hard for the machines of the day. Then, in 1979, the kings of Spain and Morocco signed a joint declaration to investigate a permanent link. Both countries set up dedicated state bodies, and they have been studying it, on and off, for over 40 years. Surveys, seabed scans, feasibility reports, a mountain of paperwork, and never a single meter of tunnel. Because down there, waiting in the dark, is the thing that has defeated every plan. It's called the Camarinal Sill. It is an underwater ridge, the shallowest bar of rock separating the Atlantic from the Mediterranean, sitting at roughly 300 meters depth. On a map, it looks like a gift, the shallowest place to cross. But the rock itself is a nightmare. The geology here includes formations called flysch, layered sediments where soft, crumbly shale alternates with hard, abrasive sandstone, folded and fractured by tectonic forces. For a tunnel boring machine, this is the worst possible enemy. Soft rock and hard rock alternating without warning means the machine's cutting head is constantly slamming from one to the other. Add enormous water pressure at depth and unstable, unpredictable ground, and you have the reason engineers have stared at this crossing for half a century and quietly walked away. For decades, the honest answer to, "Can we tunnel the Strait of Gibraltar?" was, "We don't know." And then, recently, that changed. In 2025, the German firm Herrenknecht, the world's leading manufacturer of tunnel boring machines, was asked to look at the problem and give a verdict. And this matters because Herrenknecht builds the machines. Their reputation depends on being honest about what those machines can and cannot do. They studied the Camarinal Sill, the flysch, the depths, the pressures, and they concluded that it is technically feasible. That purpose-built tunnel boring machines, operating at the required pressures, could get through. For the first time in the entire history of this project, the people who make the machines said, yes, this can be done. Momentum followed fast. Spain commissioned a full, updated preliminary design, the first since 2007. Spain and Morocco signed a memorandum to run 3 years of joint studies on the seismic behavior of the strait. A marine expedition was planned to map the Camarinal Sill in 3 dimensions, and Spain approved fresh funding for technical studies. After 50 years of dreaming, the paperwork finally started to look like a plan. So what would it actually be? Not a bridge, a rail tunnel. Current designs point to 2 single-track railway tubes, each around 7 meters across, running in opposite directions, with a central service gallery between them for maintenance and emergencies. The same 3-bore layout used by the Channel Tunnel, adapted for far harsher conditions. The route currently favored runs from near Tarifa in Spain to near Tangier in Morocco. Estimates for the full link run to roughly 42 kilometers, with somewhere around 28 kilometers of it beneath the sea, reaching depths of up to 475 meters. If it is ever completed, it would rank among the longest and deepest rail tunnels ever built. And the payoff? A journey between Europe and Africa in about 30 minutes. Trains, freight, and potentially power and data cables flowing between 2 continents that have never once been physically connected. But before you get excited, here is the reality check. Spain, Portugal, and Morocco are jointly hosting the Football World Cup in 2030, and there was hope the tunnel might arrive in time for it. Herrenknecht's own assessment ruled that out flatly. The realistic window, they said, is somewhere between 2035 and 2040, and some analysts say even that is optimistic, with costs estimated anywhere from around 8.5 billion euros up to figures several times higher, depending on who you ask. Then there are the environmental constraints. The strait is a protected conservation zone, home to well over 1,000 marine species, with orcas passing through. Every drill, every survey, every machine has to work around that. And of course, the politics haven't gone anywhere. A project like this needs steady political will across multiple governments and multiple elections, in 2 countries, for over a decade. That is harder to guarantee than any rock formation. So here we are, 2 continents, 14 kilometers apart, close enough to see, close enough to swim, and separated by a piece of water so deep, so violent, so busy, and so politically loaded that in the entire history of engineering, nobody has managed to lay a single stone across it. For the first time, the machines say it's possible. The studies are running. The money is starting to move. And somewhere out there, in a strait that has divided Europe and Africa since the beginning of human history, there may finally be a hole drilled through the dark, and a train that crosses between worlds in half an hour. Or, like every plan before it, it may quietly disappear into the paperwork. 50 years of trying says, don't hold your breath. But for the first time, the answer to why is there still no bridge has a follow-up question. Not why not, but how soon? If a story like this fascinated you, hit that like button and subscribe, because we are only just beginning to uncover the impossible places our world is still hiding. We'll see you in the next one.